This episode is brought to you by Thorn, and I have some incredible news for any of you that are in the military, first responder, or medical professions. In an effort to give back, Thorn is now offering you an ongoing 25% off each and every one of your purchases of their incredible nutritional solutions. Now, Thorn is the official supplement of CrossFit, the UFC, the Mayo Clinic, the Human Performance Project, and multiple special operations organizations. I myself have used them for several years, and that is why I brought them on as a sponsor. Some of my favorite products they have are their Multivitamin Elite, their Whey Protein, the Super EPA, and then most recently, Cinequil. As a firefighter, a stuntman, and a martial artist, I've had my share of brain trauma and sleep deprivation, and Cinequil is their latest brain health supplement. Now, to qualify for the 35% off, go to thorn.com, thorne.com. Click on sign in and then create a new account. You will see the opportunity to register as a first responder or member of military. When you click on that, it will take you through verification with GovX. You'll simply choose a profession, provide one piece of documentation, and then you are verified for life. From that point onwards, you will continue to receive 35% off through Thorn. Now, for those of you who don't qualify, there is still the 10% off using the code BTS10, Behind the Shield 10, for a one-time purchase. Now, to learn more about Thorn, go to episode 323 of the Behind the Shield podcast with Joel Totoro and Wes Barnett. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome back onto the show former Green Beret and founder of We Defy Foundation, Alan Shebaro. Now, Alan was first on the show on episode 900, and we dove into a bunch of topics, from jiu-jitsu to the conflict in Gaza and everything in between. Now, what I really admire about Alan is the courage of his voice. And what I mean is, during this conflict, especially in Gaza, there have been very few people speaking out against it, which from a human point of view, I think is horrendous. So we're going to revisit that situation. He was actually in the West Bank and witnessed many things with his own eyes. We're going to talk about immigration and ICE, the conflict with Iran, and so many other areas. So before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of over 1,100 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I welcome back onto the show Alan Shebaro. Enjoy. Well, Alan, I want to start by saying welcome back onto the Behind the Shield podcast. We spoke a little while ago. I actually didn't look up the episode number, so I'll put that on the show notes. But I want to start by welcoming you back onto the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Oh, thanks so much, man. Happy to be here.
So where on planet Earth are we finding you today?
I actually am in Poland right now.
Brilliant. So, well, let's start with, I think you and I spoke about a year ago, if I've got that right now, maybe just a little bit less. So yes. I'm going to put it to you first. Talk to me about the things that you've seen over the last 12 months. And let's start highlighting some of the things, the actionable things that we can do to start righting some of these wrongs collectively.
So I think actually we spoke before I went to the West Bank. And let me just say, it wasn't just an eye opener, but it was beyond that. Honestly, I was expecting it to be bad. I didn't expect it to be as bad as it was, and it just kind of blew my mind. So initially I went there. I got on with this company. I volunteered to go provide security for surgeons that were going into Gaza. And I was staging out of the West Bank. So I was there for about 2 months. And I never got to go to Gaza. So I stayed in the West Bank the whole time, primarily in Hebron. So I spent some time in Bethlehem, but most of it was in Hebron, the largest city that they have down there. Pretty conservative town. Didn't know what to expect. The last time I was in the Middle East, the last time I was in the Middle East was in Iraq. So I didn't know what to expect and how it was going to be received. And I think that was actually part of it. With everything that I've heard, you hear a lot of conflicting things, especially in the beginning of it. And so I was honestly, I was curious to see how it was going to happen. And so I went through in Jordan, and then I went and crossed the border into the West Bank. And man, it was an eye opener. The people were so much more welcoming than I ever expected. I mean, they're truly like the nicest people I ever met in my life. I never heard the word welcome more in my life than I did when I was there. I never drank more coffee in my life than I did when I was there either. Just because everywhere I went, I don't really blend. So they, if I walked by and they knew I was a foreigner, they're like, come sit down, come. And so I tried initially like, oh no, thank you, I appreciate it. I gotta get going. But I'm like, no, that's it. Come, okay, all right, never mind, I'll come. So I sat down with them, and most of them spoke pretty good English, at least enough to conversate. And they just honestly just wanted to know what I was doing there, and wanted to see then. Of course, the two most common questions is if you're married and if you have kids. Half of them try to hook me up with someone that in their family. But truly just phenomenal, gentle, and nice human beings. I mean, it's welcoming. Honestly, I can't stress that word enough. Now, on the flip side of that, in Hebron, there's massive settlements that are there. And the only time that I actually felt threatened was when I had guns pointed at me by the Israelis. And that happened 9 times in 2 months. Sometimes at checkpoints, sometimes just standing there. And actually, I think you've seen it on my profile. I got one picture. I'm literally just standing there, my hands crossed, and I was looking. And this guy literally had his gun on me for about 6 or 7 minutes. And I wanted to make sure that was the case. So I actually got up and walked a little bit just to see if it was like maybe he just doesn't know how to handle a weapon. And he just followed me, keeping the muzzle pointed at me. So it was intentional. And it was meant to intimidate. But I was, I'm from Texas, dude. I mean, getting a gun pointed at me happens like every week on I-35 during rush hour traffic. So there really wasn't. I'm like, this ain't my first time, man. It probably ain't going to be my last. So it was, walking the apartheid wall and seeing everything. Man, there was a lot of things that I started kind of thinking about. And one of the things is I don't even think that a lot of the Israeli citizens have an idea of who they hate. And I think that that's there more for a psychological reason, so that people won't ever get into conversation. You know what I mean? I truly believe that it's one of the big parts of it, just so they never get to know each other, so they can keep up this facade of they hate us from the get-go, and they study that in their schools, and in all their books have anti-Jewish, anti-Israeli, and I went to the schools. I went through the books from like 3rd grade to like 8th grade. And there's nothing in there, and I don't know why I was thinking there was, but just to say I did. So man, it was seeing the settlements and how the settlers were. They it's truly like dehumanizing on a daily basis. Just to get to the Ibrahimi Mosque, for them to make prayer, they got to go through. I went through 3 checkpoints just to get through to that. They just do random questions and pat you down and make you go through like a metal detector and all that. And it truly is dehumanizing. One of the things I saw was, and I got this on video as well. There was a Muslim woman and her husband was on the other side. And I'm sure you know by now, like when, especially wearing the hijab, they stopped her, they had her sit down, and there was 2 men that were literally surrounding her, and her husband again is on the other side, and they're trying to strip search her. So they grabbed her hijab and try to take it off, and she's like fighting them off and saying like, no, no, no. And the husband's like right there, like rightfully so, like freaking out, going like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? I mean, if anyone could put themselves in that situation, imagine how they would react. You know what I mean? They're doing that to try to get them to react, right? And he knows this, but at the same time, it's very emotional because it's his wife. You know what I mean? I mean, I didn't know the woman. I didn't know the guy. I was just recording it. But I felt enraged. You know what I mean? I can, if I put myself in that situation, I don't know what I would have done, He handled it a lot better than I did, I'll tell you that. But even then, the guys were just coming over and yelling and pointing their weapons at him and threatening him through one of the flashbangs to try to get him to walk away. It was just, it's hateful. It truly is. And imagine, and so I was there for 2 months. So imagine them going through a lifetime of that. You know what I mean? And that's truly what it was unbelievable, was like how they can still be as friendly as they were to me and while they're actually dealing with this subjugation, this apartheid, knowing that they can't travel, they have to be subjected to all these checkpoints. They're constantly with their boot on their neck. You know what I mean? I don't know. And trying to explain this, especially to like Americans, like, and I just try to use it like an X or Y, if X was here and they were occupying your home, how would a Y react? You know what I mean? Try to put in those terms, because for some reason, when it comes to Israel, no one actually would like, well, they have their reasons. Well, actually, no, they don't. It's literally just, it's an occupation, bottom line. And the way they're reacting again is all in response to things. You know what I mean? Yeah. Sorry, I'm on a tangent on that one.
No. Well, it's interesting because I've had several different perspectives. I had a firefighter on, Brian. I'm blanking on his last name at the moment, but he is married to a Palestinian American woman, and they went back to the West Bank, and he was, an eyewitness to these forced occupations. And then I've had Dr. Thea Ahmad on, I think 3 times now, and he was over there doing humanitarian work in Gaza in some of these hospitals that no longer exist now. So you get these boots on the ground, eyewitness accounts rather than Fox or CNN or whatever fucking mouthpiece that people, believe like the gospel. And so it's so important to hear this. We've got a Green Beret who fought for his country, who'd fought in the Middle East, who's now boots on the ground, didn't have any initial allegiance to one specific religion or nation. And you're just literally saying, this is how it is.
Yep. I caught a couple of those episodes, man. They were great. And again, like being there and again, Hebron being the most conservative places. Here was the crazy part. There was, I was there during Eid, and I rented an apartment in the building, and during Eid, there was one of my neighbors, and she had like a 7-year-old daughter, came up and had like a plate of fruit and some snacks on there, and some sweets, and just, here you go, you speak English, and my Arabic is atrocious. So, but I had dinner with somebody from that apartment building at least once or twice a week, on average twice a week, honestly. They would just invite me to their home, cook me dinner, treat me like family, and they don't know who I am. You know what I mean? It's just, that's how they are. One of the craziest things I notice as well is that there's no homelessness. There aren't any homeless people. It's like, why? If you don't have a place, we'll find a place for you, and that's it. It's very simple. I remember in Bethlehem, I was actually telling the story to a friend of mine today. There was like a little shawarma stand, and I remember going there, and there was clearly like this he was probably like in his late teens or early 20s, that he had some type of mental disability, and he was kind of dirty and disheveled. But I was like, hey, let me buy him, like sandwich, and he's like, no, we got it. It's no problem. We got it every time. And that solidarity, that kind of community type feel is, we have this impression that, these third world countries and these places that, where more poor people live, that they're there to take advantage of you, right? They're going to steal your shoes while you're still wearing them. And man, it's always just the opposite. You know what I mean? It's the people that have a lot of money that try to steal your funds from your bank account, and, the politicians that try to, swindle you to believe in something so they can spend their, tax money so they can benefit themselves. But it's just the opposite. It's just, we've been led to believe that for so long.
It's really interesting. I haven't shared it yet, but I saw a thing on Finland, and Finland has no homelessness, and Japan has no homelessness, because they were like, well, let's give them housing and then work on mental health. And I think once they, if I remember rightly, I just kind of scanned it. Once they initiated this program, like almost immediately, 80% of the people, went back to work, actually got back on their feet. And then you look at the most affluent country on the planet and the homelessness that we have. And obviously my community listening to this, I mean, we're the ones that engage with these men and women that are so desperate, whether it's addiction or mental health. I think 10% of our homeless are veterans, if I got that right. I mean, and yet there you are going to these other nations that arguably looking down our nose are poorer, third world, however you want to describe it. And they actually got a better sense of community than we have here.
Another place that shocked me was when I went to Portugal about 10 years ago, and they I always kind of, if I see a cop there, I'm like, hey, what area should I be leery of? What should I avoid? And they're like, I don't know, there's really not any place. And I was like, well, what's kind of like the most common crime? They're like, pickpockets. Yeah, look out for pickpockets. Yeah, that's about it. And then come to find out, they literally have the lowest crime rate in all of the EU. But here's the crazy part. They decriminalized all their drugs. But before that, they set up an infrastructure of, they treated their drug addiction as a health problem, not a crime problem, right? And so making that change and setting up, rehab centers that were government funded that took care of them in the sense where they got them to go and be a working part of society again, because they realized this is a health problem. You know what I mean? But I think especially with the privatization of prisons, and we need to keep them filled up. But the thing is that it costs almost 3 times as much to keep someone in prison than it does to get them rehab. You know what I mean? Especially if it's a drug addiction. Let's not even talk about the cannabis convictions, because that's just absolutely ridiculous in my mind. But we continually try to create it or keep it as it's a criminal problem, right? And they're all criminals, and that's why they're doing it, because they want to do it. When we realize that 83% of the heroin addicted homeless people that we have, out of this almost 700,000, 83% are got that way from prescription drugs. So, and this is kind of like the point that I was making earlier, was it's the rich people that are taking away from the the middle class and from the rest of the population, so they can continually. Those are the biggest drug dealers that there are, that are around. That they're literally like controlling the entire population based on drugs, and they've managed to shift the mentality, especially with Purdue Pharma when they came out with that. Blame the victim, right? And we still haven't gotten away from that. We still are regurgitating that. And that was literally propaganda to protect themselves. But it's still implemented in our minds that, they want to be that way. Oh, they're just lazy. Oh, they just want to be addicted. When you can't get them the prescriptions anymore from the doctor, and he's cutting you off, and it gives you no other alternative, your brain is already rewired. The only thing that it wants to do is get on that drug again, and or something similar to it. And so they'll try to find something that they can do in order for that to happen, or make that happen, with any other type of drug that they can find. And so, but again, because people profit off of it, it's going to maintain, its control on people and the population.
It's funny you say Portugal, because my mom and my brother moved there about 25 years ago, I think, maybe a little bit less. And when I started the podcast, I don't know if we talked about this last time, but she said to me, "Hey, do you know what they did here?" And she relayed exactly what you just told me. And I ended up going to Lisbon when I was visiting one year and sat down with João Goulão, the man who spearheaded that whole initiative. And I visited, his headquarters and one of the treatment centers. And like you said, I mean, I've been to Portugal, for 2 decades now, visiting my family. And when I think of the cops, they've got these shiny revolvers, almost like a kind of Roy Rogers holster, because the damn things never get used. And then I come back to the US, and when I was still working, I just cover dead people with yellow sheets over and over again from gun violence and all the ripple effects of addiction. And we talk about the government. Are they actually doing the right thing for the people? Well, most recently, the FDA obviously, back in the 90s approved OxyContin, and my population are the ones that are dealing with that even to this day, the poor people that are struggling. But then very recently, MDMA, which we know is extremely effective in treating PTSD and, some of the other mental health issues, especially in our populations, plural, and it got shut down by the FDA. And that's not even prescribed. You do it with a counselor in an actual facility. You're not giving it to take home. So if that doesn't underline the fact that they don't give a fuck, that they have no problem. And then Richard Sackler lives in Boca Raton, Florida, in a mansion to this day, but how many people are locked away, like you said, for having a baggie of weed in their pocket in the 90s? I mean, we need a complete control alt delete, because the way we're doing it, all it does is just destroy the average American's homes and communities.
Absolutely. You nailed it on the head.
So, going back to, when you were in the West Bank, talk to me about, what the people were doing that you were helping protect, and were there any stories from them, especially on the medical side?
So honestly, I wasn't able to go there in any other capacity than to be a tourist. And I think that was, to me, like one of the hardest things to deal with, is because as much as I wanted to help, as much as I wanted to do something, I literally there was nothing I could do. And, I don't know, I'm sure especially on my Instagram page and every other podcast that I've done, you see everything from Palestine plastered on there, and all the things to deal with. And I'm trying to bring that to light, because the one thing that everyone said was, we don't have a voice. Speak for us. Be our voice. And I took that to heart. I truly did. And I will continue to do so for as long as I possibly can. I don't have any intention of stopping whatsoever. And I mean, if that's the only thing I can do, that to me is the very bare minimum and it's not even something where you have to have friends or family there. Just be a freaking human being. You know what I mean? And realize that, that the Palestinians have been living under these conditions of ethnic cleansing and apartheid and, constant, dehumanization, shootings, murder, detainees. I mean, it goes on and on. And what I couldn't wrap my head around was truly how I've only been able to experience this, excuse me, for 2 months, and them going through that. I just, that's one thing. Just like, I can't believe they survived this. I can't believe that they're not so hateful to anybody, that comes around. And one of the biggest misconceptions that a lot of people have is that, like, oh, they just hate Jews. Let me tell you one thing. The only Jews that I saw in the West Bank were either settlers who are violent and they go in there and they try to burn your crops, and they try to take over your home and all these small areas from there, and the Israeli occupation forces. I mean, those were literally the only two Israelis that I saw. And so when people are referring to like they hate the Jews, yeah, the only Jews that they saw were those. You see what I mean? And so when they have like the Star of David and it's crossed out, it's because they wear that on their uniform. But people like to twist that around and try to say, oh, they hate all Jews. No, they don't hate Jews as in Jews like the religion and everything, the people themselves. They hate the people that are oppressing them. And rightfully so. Anybody in their right mind would want to resist against that. When you have a resistance, if you want to end a resistance, you gotta end what they're resisting against. It's that so simple. You know what I mean? It's painful to try to explain this to people when they don't want to get it. They want to, and we've had propaganda, kind of pushed in for the longest time that it's literally like it's almost insulting them if you're telling them that they're wrong. Like, no, what you're thinking and what you're saying and what you believe is wrong. And this is the one thing I've kind of prided myself on is literally having these conversations, with these direct messages in the background, and literally having these small conversations with people. And they're like, well, I didn't know that. Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know about the history. People don't know about how it started. People don't know about the Havar Agreement in 1933, between Hitler and the Zionists, that started the migration of 33,000 Jewish Zionists between 1933 and 1939. People don't know about the first terrorist attack that happened in the Middle East, and the SS Patria in 1940, where they were so desperate to keep, the Jews and that were there, using them as a front, that when the British were try to deport them, they literally blew up that ship and killing like 261 Jews. That was the Jewish Zionists that did that. You know what I mean? And initially they tried to blame the Arabs. So it wasn't like this act of heroism, where they're trying to like stop them from leaving. If they try to blame somebody else, that's already like a false flag operation. And they did it again 6 years later, July 22nd, 1946 at the King David Hotel, where they bombed the south wing of the hotel, dressed up as Arabs and telling everyone, yeah, it was Arabs, it was Arabs, it was Arabs. And that killed Jews, that killed the British, that killed Palestinians, that killed 91 of a mixed group. And the crazy part is like, what's his name? Yitzhak, Yitzhak Rabin? Yeah.
That sounds right.
Sorry. Was actually prime minister later on. You know what I mean? And so these people, and Menachem Begin was actually behind the King David Hotel bombing. This guy not only was a PM, but he won the Nobel Peace Prize. So not only are they not held accountable to it, but they're rewarded for it. You know what I mean? And this, I think, is one of the worst things that they have to deal with, is that, not only are they doing wrong, but they're being rewarded by the West because they're able to spin it. You see what I mean? So the amount of frustration that I can't even fathom, and that it doesn't even stop there. The Lehi, the Irgun, the Haganah, all these groups later on joined together, right? They just banded them together, and they all absorbed into each other, and they created the IDF. So literally, you have a terrorist organization, terrorist cells that united together, and that's what became the Israeli Defense Forces. And that's what happened in 1948. Those were the people that were doing it. So they had a head start in all this. I mean, these weren't fringe groups, right? They were the backbone of the Israeli military.
I think we talked before, when I reflect back to growing up, I grew up as a young boy in the 80s. I was right next to a military base in the UK, Ministry of Defense base. And I remember having to sweep our car for bombs because of the IRA and, because there were mainland bombings. But when I start learning the history of that occupation, you understand how this became. Now, is it right that each side is blowing up, innocent people or shooting innocent people in Belfast or whatever it is? Of course not. But the only way you're going to stop this domino effect is you got to understand the origin, and you got to stop this toing and froing. It's like gang killings, the Crips and the Bloods. At what point do you go, hey, there's a lot of young black people dying here, we need to stop this? So when I look at this, from an American lens now, I mean, you and I have heard this over and over again. Oh, but October 7th. It's like, well, yeah, October 7th, and there was provocation and things, but yeah, it was horrendous. No one is saying that the innocent people killed on October 7th wasn't a tragedy as well. It was another byproduct of this back and forth. But to then turn your head at all the atrocities, I mean, if you look at the footage now of Gaza, I mean, there's not a building standing. We're talking, I know it was 50,000. I'm assuming it's probably 60,000 or so people killed now. I think 20,000 of those were children. We've got so many emergency workers and doctors and nurses murdered in cold blood. Why is that narrative still so strong? And a lot of countries like the UK were absolutely cowardly at first, and they're finally starting to come around and have a backbone now. But our own nation still refuses to outwardly condemn what's going on. In fact, the opposite. They still are basically funding and arming the very oppressor.
One of the things that if you look at the origin of how these resistance groups even were, why were they created? Why are they doing this? These are the questions that are asked. They just want to condemn what's happening right now. People have goldfish memories. So it's one of those things like, for example, Hezbollah, right? Hezbollah wasn't even started until 1984. And no one asks why. Well, they invaded Lebanon for the first time in 1979. And then they they attacked in 1979. They fully invaded and occupied since 1982. Then Hezbollah was created. You see what I mean? So you have these resistance forces that are literally, they're pushing back on the occupation, because this is a foreign country coming in and trying to take over and pushing the lines constantly. Israel doesn't have any defined borders. They do that by design. That's the kind of crazy part, is that a lot of people don't even know that. And and then they just want to bring up for example, the embassy bombings in 1982, right? Well, the barracks bombings, the Marines barrack bombings, and right before that, the embassy bombings, they just want to remember that. But again, they don't want to study history and see why did that happen. And I think that's one of the most the most disheartening things is that you have this massive population that is supporting these criminals, and they don't want to know why. So if you talk about like the worst slaughter of civilians in Middle East history, right, in modern history of this century at least, it wasn't October 7th by any stretch of the imagination. People don't want to remember the Sabra and Shatila massacre, right? Or even the details to it, where 14,000 of the PLO fighters actually tried to okay, we are going to disarm, we are going to put our weapons down, and we're going to leave. And so the U.S. brokered that deal, was named Habib, the ambassador Habib, brokered that deal. And they literally put down their weapons at the Sabra refugee camp, and the Shatila refugee camp was left with women, children, and the elderly, right? And right after they left to Tunisia. And right after they left, this is when the Phalangist Christian group that had partnered up with the Israelis had surrounded it and just slaughtered up to 3,500 people in 2 days. In 2 days. Then after that is because they brokered a deal. And so can you imagine 14,000 people that said, you know what? We're going to be the bigger person in this. We're going to lay down our weapons. We're going to leave as long as my family is protected. And they give them their word, right? The U.S. gave them their word. And the multinational forces that were there for peacekeeping mission, they were like, okay. But the problem is they took off too. And right after that, 3 days later after that is when that happened. And they were popping flares. The Israelis were like surrounded them, making sure no one left, and pop flares for them at night. So they continue the massacre. That was the worst, slaughter of civilians in modern history. And that's what led to it. You see what I mean?
What year was that?
1982.
Yeah. Yeah. So why do we not hearing, I mean, you were obviously, someone, and again, I literally had my Instagram shut down and they said it was a copyright violation, but I know, there was a big bullseye on my back because I actually, care enough about humans that we're trying to be a voice for, the atrocities that are going on. And again, it's not blindly pro-Palestinian and anti-Israeli. It's just pro-human. So whoever is in the the crossfire, I'm trying to advocate for. But I'm not hearing this voice from many people in the veteran population. Even, I mean, I had Tulsi on, and we're talking about the whole industrial military complex, and assuming there's going to be more diplomacy, and then we get into here, and again, zero. So why are we not hearing more of our veterans speaking up against these atrocities when they were held to a very staunch rules of engagement themselves?
That is a phenomenal question, and it's one that I have yet to figure out. We honestly, like it boggles my mind because it's not only that. And so when I'm talking to especially Americans that are completely like staunch supporters of Israel, I have to tap into like how it affects the U.S. Right. So recently, not recently, since 1948, we have given more aid, more money, our tax dollar money, up to $310 billion combined to Israel. For what? How does the U.S. citizen benefit from giving that amount of money? Since 2000, was it 2015? I think it was like 10 years to $3.4 billion a year under the Obama administration. And that was a shitbag move on his part to actually apply for, to prove that. But $3.4 billion a year, that's literally $10.4 million a day to Israel. They have free healthcare. They have free education. It's not a third world country. Why are they getting all this money? You see what I mean? What can we do? This is why we have, at the same time, we have homeless veterans. We have a homeless population, period, of almost 700,000. We have, a drug problem. We have, we have more people going broke from medical bills, having to file for bankruptcy than anything else. I mean, 53% of the U.S. population is literally going broke from medical bills. They have to declare bankruptcy from that. And we're just ignoring that, saying, you know what? You can have $10.4 billion or $10.4 million a day of our tax money. And where's Doge on this? You know what I mean? Where are they? What the fuck are they doing with it? You know what I mean? And this is at the same time where we've gone in and supported them more vetoes for Israel than any other country. I mean, almost half of the vetoes that we've had since the inception of the UN, more veto power, the veto that we've actually used has been for Israel. You know what I mean? And again, to save them from their atrocities. We have the nuclear program. They never signed the non-proliferation treaty, right? They don't have inspections. But all the things that we went to war with and so much less with Iraq because they were the big threat. And these are the guys that Saddam Hussein was the one that he was like buddy. You know what I mean? We were like funding him with all the military so they could fight Iran. At the same time, funding Iran itself to fight Iraq. Good old Oliver North. And that's the crazy part is that, but people don't want to know the history of that. People are just saying, oh, they're saying death to America, death to America. Well, guess what? North Korea's been saying that for a while. How come we don't bomb them? They got nukes. Yeah, no shit. So how can you blame them for that? And then when you have like, flight 655? Yes, flight 655 that happened in 1988. This is not ancient history, right? This is just what happened, and that it was a civilian flight. And the USS Vicennes, Vicennes, in the Gulf, the American warship that was in the Gulf at the time, they mistook it for an F-14 Tomcat, and they literally like downed a civilian Airbus that was full of civilians from Iran going to Dubai. And the crazy part is that we never apologized for that. The commander got a Legion of Merit. He got an honorable discharge. You wonder why they say these things. Well, just dig. You don't have to dig deep at all. You just have to dig a little bit and wonder why. So imagine like all those family members, right? The 200 and I forgot how many, like 288, I think it was the number. But again, even when George Bush took over, the senior, he's like, I'm not going to apologize for anything. You know what I mean? And he made that statement in general, but everyone knows what he was referring to. And he was saying this like it's some bravado, like bullshit. Dude, you fucked up. Just account for it, so we can actually like create some type of peace. But this is what it continues ongoing. Everything that's going on with Iran right now. And again, they're the same, death to America. There's a lot of countries that say that. Probably, the majority of them, if not all of them, are the ones that we were part of a coup. Iran included. Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953, Operation Ajax, where you have Kermit Roosevelt, right? The grandson of Teddy Roosevelt, that started that when he was part of the CIA to overthrow Mossadegh. And that was a democratically elected prime minister who wanted to nationalize his oil. And he was actually at the White House, staying there for like 2 weeks when he was sick, staying with Truman. And when the British came to say, hey, they want to take our profits from this, and they were making money hand over fist and treating the Iranians like shit. And Truman's like, no, we're not doing that. And then he waited till like the next presidency, and then the MI6 in the U.S. conducted this coup, and then put in the Shah Pahlavi and Pahlavi, whatever, that one, and the monarchy, and they and they're like, oh, it's modern, it's the U.S. of the Middle East, but they ignore entirely the Sabak, right? The kind of like the secret police that was torturing, imprisoning, murdering people, like any type of dissent that was happening whatsoever, and he was squandering all the national assets and just for himself, and then when he had the student revolution that stormed the CIA, it's because they had everything there stored, and the CIA finally admitted to it in 2013, right? But they kept that secret for the longest time, and that's what they went to, and they found all the proof, and they showed it to the world. And that's the crazy part, is that it's not just. You have to, I'm not taking sides here, but you have to understand what's going on before you can say they're in the wrong 100%, no matter what, and what has Iran ever attacked anyone on U.S. soil? No, never, not once. Have they attacked everyone in the Middle East? Yeah. Well, should we be there in the first place? And that's what people fail to realize, is that if we weren't there, we wouldn't get bombed, we wouldn't get killed. The USS Cole was another example of that. Why were we there in the first place? You know what I mean? If we weren't there, then none of this would happen. And what right do we have to be there? We have bases, in 88 different countries. And imagine if Iranian bases were surrounding, the United States, we would feel threatened too. And then if we shot down a passenger plane, how would the U.S. react to that? Do you think they'd forget about that? But Israel does that in 1967 with the USS Liberty. And everyone's like, oh, that's just ancient news. Oh, that's ancient news. Let's forget about that. Let's just put that behind us. And they're like, oh, it was a mistake. No, it wasn't a mistake. I read the transcripts on that. And I saw all the interviews from like all the people that were actually surviving from the USS Liberty. And not a single one said it was a mistake. They had flybys in the morning. It was clearly marked. Everything about it was just, it was planned and executed to the T. And the worst part, and I'm not always like blaming Israel on this, because the U.S. had a part in that. They actually sent a message saying, hey, we need reinforcements, we need backup, we need some protection on this. And LBJ responded like, we're not going to embarrass Israel. So it's not always, I can't say all of the blame, but they did all the attacking. You know what I mean? And then when the life rafts came out, they were shooting at the life rafts, trying to sink them as well, because they didn't want any witnesses to see what they were doing in Syria. No one wants to talk about that. Let's talk about it.
Absolutely. Well, you talked about taking sides too. I mean, you've mentioned, Republican presidents, you mentioned Democrat presidents, Democratic. This is one thing that I really struggle with today is that it feels like people have found themselves where they would adhere to a political identity more than the shared humanity, more than the benefit of the nation. So you're actually a Republican first, American second, or a Democrat first, American second. How have we got to that point, and how the fuck do we get ourselves out of the absolute shit show that is this deliberate division that's separating our people?
Man, that is the question of the century. I definitely think it doesn't start with the current presidency. I think this one's like, for division wise, it's like the worst thing that's ever happened. And again, if you were following me before, you know how many times I condemned Biden for the shit. You know what I mean? I called him out on everything that it was. I called him a shitbag. He's definitely complicit in what's happening. You know what I mean? I don't give him a pass whatsoever. But
Absolutely.
Trump coming in and continuing it, but he also received what, 235 million from APAC. So we have foreign entities that are looking out for the best interest of a foreign country before our own. That should end right away. That's the first thing. We have politicians that literally go into bank off the laws that they pass and the policies that they pass in order to benefit the corporations. I think the Citizens United case was literally like one of the worst things to happen in history. It gave corporations so much more power. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we're not looking at. To the root of this, the way it's become, and I truly believe this, is when someone's theology or ideology becomes infused with their identity. Now it's not like, if you tell me like some of my statements are wrong in this, no problem. I got my dates wrong. I'm like, shit, you're right. My bad. I can't do that anymore if it's attached to my identity, because now you're saying I'm wrong. You see what I mean? And once you're saying I'm wrong, now I have to double down and protect myself, because now you're attacking me personally. But I'm not attacking you personally. I'm literally saying what you're saying is wrong. But they can't separate that anymore. And so it becomes like a direct reflection of their identity, and you can no longer tell them that they're wrong. Like even if I like provide proof and citations and resources, or like just one thing after another, they'll ignore it and move to something else. But Obama, but Biden. I'm not giving them a pass either. But what can Biden do right now? About the current situation. If Biden was in office, I'd still be criticizing him. If Obama was in office, I'd still be criticizing him. But neither one of them are in office right now. It's the current person in. And we have people that consider themselves constitutionalists. They have the tattoos, "We the people," all over the place. But their allegiance is to the president. No, that should never happen. This is the reason why we have such an amazing constitution, because they knew that it wasn't going to be perfect and it could be changed. And the problem with this is that this document is our rules and parameters that we have to live by. And my loyalty is to the United States only, to the Constitution. That's who I have. That's my highest authority, is the U.S. Constitution. Nothing else, not another country, definitely not another country, just the United States. And somehow this is offensive to some people. When I say this is offensive, because I don't put theology first, because I don't put foreign interests first. How is this offensive? I literally care about my country first. I am a fucking patriot because I believe in the Constitution, and the Constitution is the only thing I'm loyal to. But somehow I'm not a patriot anymore because I'm criticizing a foreign government. How the fuck can I criticize my own country, and it literally says so in the Constitution that freedom of speech to do that, but I can't, and all of a sudden I have to watch what I say when I talk about a foreign government? That makes no sense to me. But to get back to your question, sorry for the rant.
Rant away.
Man, I don't know. The thing is that we've seen this playbook before. We've seen this happen before in so many different things. These false flag attacks, in order to get the majority of people that don't understand history, that don't do their own research, that they're easily influenced. watching the congressional hearings on the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, right? I watched this like a week ago, black and white. It was in 1964. And if you hear like the things that they're saying, they're like, oh, the first attack that happened, we were shooting warning shots, to the Vietnamese in international waters. Well, first off, you're in international waters. What are you doing warning shots for, right? And then they had like a little scuffle. And then the second time, they said that the Vietnamese attacked, but they didn't. You know what I mean? That's the crazy part is that there was just a bunch of like walking around the topic, and they were just trying to dodge it. And it's so shady. But that is literally what got us involved, like the catalyst for us to get like, instead of going from like an advisory position in Vietnam to actually full out blown boots on the ground, let's go. And the whole that's when they started talking about the communist the domino effect, right? If Vietnam gets taken, Laos, Cambodia, and then the whole world becomes, communist. And that was like the big communist threat. They used that, consistently. And that was like their doctrine to do that. It's the same thing. We've seen this I hate sounding like a conspiracy theorist, but holy shit, dude. Why aren't the 9/11 files made public? Why are they confidential? People have so many questions, including myself, like it just doesn't make sense. And if that was the catalyst for us to go into war, we certainly should have. We lost enough people at war. We lost like, we lost what, 7,000 people in Afghanistan and Iraq. We maybe 3 times the amount were injured, right? But there's a congressman, I totally forgot his name, but the first time I heard this was about 4 years ago. And since 9/11, we have lost 150,000 to veteran, suicide. 150,000, from the accumulation of all these different wars that we've been into. And yet we're still hiding that. We're still like, it's still hush hush. We still can't talk about it. It's like, and I think that's an absolute disgrace, right? And so, what's his name? Smedley Butler, the Marine general, right? War is a racket. He had this figured out like 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. He knew that what was going on. And when you read his book, it's just crazy, like how spot on he is. We're literally, sending forces in. The U.S. doesn't have friends; it has interests, and these interests always benefit the corporations, never the American citizen. So why are we doing this? The one thing that's crazy about Iran is that you brought up Tulsi Gabbard, and she said in March they have no nuclear weapons. They have no capability of making nuclear weapons. They haven't. And again, we had inspectors out there. We had people going up. They had 24/7 access until 2018, until Trump eliminated that, right? But it's more than oil. One thing they skipped over is that the last 10 years they've been surveying for antimony, right? And they found these massive deposits, like 7,000 metric tons of antimony, which is used in, primarily in military industrial complex. This is something that people don't talk about. And this is the crazy part, is that it's like, it's not just oil, but it's also minerals. And this is a country that isn't protected by nukes. And no way am I protecting the government of Iran. They are oppressive. They have so many human rights violations, especially against women. It's horrible. And I'm not defending them. But how is bombing the population going to help that? You see what I mean? That all it's going to do is drive them to the government to do something. And then they're going to bond and unify and to make things worse. So it's literally the most dumbest idea to send $337 million worth of fucking bombs in the B-2 to bomb place that they're going to have up and running again in a couple of months. It wasn't obliterated. It wasn't ended. They didn't end it. They're going to be up and running again in a couple of months. And what this does is like they're killing civilians. Israel attacked Iran first. And they didn't expect them to fire back at this. And it's like, okay, game on, let's go. And so they started lobbing back and forth. And we're the ones that stepped in. You know what I mean? And then the money that is spent on their defense, on the Iron Dome, is coming from us. If they want to go pick a fight with every country in the Middle East, let them. Go ahead. But let's stop funding them then at the same time. Let's see how far that goes. Once the funding for all that ends and they have to pay out of their own pocket, let's see how that goes.
See, this is something that just is so blatantly obvious. I mean, even when we went into Iraq, I remember thinking, and I'm not, well versed in global politics. I'm not a military member, but I just remember going, wait a second, the guy that's responsible for 9/11 is a Saudi guy hiding in Afghanistan, and you're going into Iraq where we had a war with your dad. This doesn't make any sense. And we know, the absolute tragedies that happened on both air quotes sides of that. And like you said, I shared a graphic of casualties of war a while ago, and it was just staggering because it starts off obviously with combat casualties, and then the entire pie chart becomes basically suicides and cancers and all the things that our veterans bring back. It's the war isn't over in a lot of these places. But when you reflect, even let's take war out of it for a second. The last 50 years, Americans have got fatter and sicker. Like, we are to the point now, we are over 70% obese or overweight. I think over 40% obese, clinically obese. We consume 75% of the world's opioids, even though we only make up 4% of the world's population. We have, I think, over 20% of the world's incarcerated population.
25.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, exactly. So my point is, that is either side of the aisle over and over again. Left, then right, then left, then right, then left, then right. And yet we're still fucking arguing about who's the best party. The system is completely broken because, in my opinion, if there's, whatever, 330 million of us now in this country, if we have to say the lesser of two evils on the final two of a presidential campaign, you don't think that's a broken system? Alan wants candidate A. I want candidate B. Alan's won. I'm like, well, no biggie, because they were both fucking awesome because they're the two best leaders in the whole country. Instead, we get these fucking idiots, these sociopaths over and over again. And then you've got an overworked, sick, obese population that can't even critically think because they're stressed, they're made angry by CNN and Fox, and now they're divided. And now you've got, as someone said on the show recently, you've got a village of peasants fighting with each other instead of going, well, let's go into the fucking castle. And so this is what blows me away, is when are we going to have an awakening and go, this is not benefiting our people? Like, our children have to rehearse their own fucking murders in their school. All the things, like, this is nothing that has been done is benefiting the American people. It's just take. Oh, we started a war. American people, we need your kids to go fight it for us. Are your kids going? Oh, fuck no, we're not sending them over there. Like, when are we going to finally go, the way we choose people is completely broken. It's corrupt. You're lining their pockets from drug companies and weapons companies and all the other things. And, it's this just, like I say, it's not a democracy at all. It's a demostocracy. You've got to be a millionaire and zero ethics to succeed in this fucking system. So until we, the Americans, we the people, I think it was written in a document that was kind of important, rise the fuck up and say enough is enough, this is going to keep happening, and families and neighbors are going to fight with each other while these people send our children to their deaths and count the money and that they get from it.
You're absolutely right. It's an illusion that we have a choice, and then people scream freedom. Well, we're actually I think the last rating that I saw is that the U.S. is 17th in the world 11th in the world for freedom, right? And people just keep thinking, and they want to believe this rhetoric of, like, my side is the good side. Well, I can, if Trump actually did something that was good, beneficial for the people, I would say, yeah, he did something beneficial for the people. If Biden or Obama or Clinton, they did things that's good for the people, I would say, yeah, they did. If they did something horrible for the people, then, like prison reform from the Clintons, that was fucking horrible, right? The 3 strikes you're out, that led to this whole, prison problem that we have right now. That was the catalyst for it. His fucking policy. The 10 years, $3.4 billion a year, to Israel, that was signed by Obama. But there's so many, it's so easy to deflect to saying these are the people that are bad. These are people that are bad. And the thing is they're not even hiding it anymore. We have, Trump, that it's in the front lawn, doing an infomercial for a car. He has his NFTs. his family is literally making money hand over fist, and we're not calling that out. And they're like, oh, well, you just have TDS. No, you dumb motherfucker. I'm literally calling out exactly what's happening here. You know what I mean? If he's selling gold shoes and Bibles that were made in China, don't you think there's something wrong on that? His Trump phone, you know what I mean? He's literally making money off it, and like, oh, that's okay. I'm like, how is that okay? You were literally pissed off for like, the damn laptop that we're talking about because he was making money. And the thing is, I'm like, yeah, if he's doing something illegal, by all means, what are you going to do with that? You've had the laptop for 5 years. What are you going to do with it now? You know what I mean? Do something. And if you really want to get him out of office, why don't you convict him like what the UN has said, you're complicit in fucking genocide? Why don't you get him for that? Well, that has to do with Israel. So we have to back out. No, that's literally something you can go after and impeach him for that. Let's do that. And I was all behind it. But everyone got quiet. Everyone got quiet after that. Like, oh, no. Well, he's a pedophile. Like, dude, you see what he said about his daughter? You know what I mean? And he doesn't even hide this shit. That's the thing is that, we literally have a convicted felon that's there and they're like, and he's more for the people. It's just, and again, I think just people just double down because their identity has become their ideology has become their identity and it's become infused. And so all of a sudden they can't be told that they're wrong. And back to your, the two-party system, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that's wrong. I was in Germany a few months ago, and they have 11 parties, and they're all like neck and neck. That's the choice. You know what I mean? That's choice. You can actually pick you have like a choice between different diverse groups, and we have two. You know what I mean? And most of the time, they're tied to the same people, the same lobbyists that look out for their own pockets. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the biggest problems is that if you can make money while you're actually, and it shouldn't be just a conflict of interest. It should be fucking illegal. Bottom line. If I had my say in it, 10 years from the time that you're actually like, you're running, like you put out on the ballot saying, yeah, I'm nominate so-and-so, and you accept that nomination. From that point on, you cannot make money outside of like what you're doing, for 10 years after you get in office, period. You have to sign a contract. Not just by the time that you're in, but the entire time, like after you're out for 10 years. If you want to write a book and everything else, 10 years after, people got to wait. If they're still interested in it, they'll buy it. But all this shit that we're doing right now is they're literally making money while they're in office. And I'm talking about both sides on this. We have shitbags like the Cash for Kids. Those were two Democrat judges. You know what I mean? And they were making money hand over fist by sending fucking kids right to juvenile detention centers to profit the private prison system. Mm-hmm. I remember seeing the mother of one of the kids. He was raped while he was in jail in the juvenile detention, whatever you call it, freaking prison, and he couldn't take it. When he got out, he snapped. He was a kid. You know what I mean? He committed suicide. That mother was livid. She was going off on these guys, and I was just cheering her on, fucking standing up, applause. Go get them. The worst part about it is that they got pardoned. They got fucking pardoned. And you know where they were spending their time? Because they did get convicted of it. They were out on fucking house arrest. How are these people like, this is what I don't get about our system. It's literally designed to benefit the rich. But we don't see that because it's the bread and circus, right? If you distract them with their necessities, they're going to forget about their liberties. It's infuriating. Honestly, I don't get it. And they always kind of point to the outside, point somewhere else. Like and Memorial, right? The Memorial Day, the post that Trump gave, Happy Memorial Day, including all the left side scumbags and and he literally went on this 2-paragraph rant. Had nothing to do with Memorial Day. It was literally just insulting, the left hand, the progressives, and all these things. How is that? And then they're like, oh, well, it's the left that doesn't want unity. It's he's trying. And how? It's like literally every public post has to do with the fake news, and saying that he was saying like the last one, like how dare you say that to me? And remember the interview with the MS-13? But no, it's not photoshopped. They're like, no, it's real. It's real. That's it. Then, well, Mr. President, I'm saying, we can discuss that later, but moving on. And he's literally trying to save his ass, and he's doubling down on it, saying, no, that's real. That's a tattoo that's on there. It's like Times New Roman font or whatever. or Microsoft font, and it's like, and it just doesn't get it. But people double down on that, or they don't want to read things, or they don't want to understand things that, if you say like bring up any type of policies, any type of, executive orders, people know like just what they're fed, and that's it. This whole immigration thing. I'm not an immigration lawyer by any means, but I can read the fucking Constitution. I know that violates the 5th and the 14th Amendment because it says all persons on U.S. soil have right to due process. Bottom line. You know what I mean? And I'm not the type of person that if someone's had due process and they're here illegally, yeah, you need to get them the fuck out. They can try again some other time, then do it right. But they've had due process, and they've done, if they're criminals, and violent criminals especially. But why in the fuck are we going after people that are in the, immigration office waiting for their appointment, and they're getting snatched up? That to me doesn't make any sense, especially with Stephen Himmler, that little fucking vermin, right? Or Stephen Miller, sorry. He bought like $100,000 in Palantir, the technology they're using right now to target these people. And if you're getting them at these courthouses, if you're getting them at the immigration courts, this is the problem. There are people that are trying to go and through the system legally to do the right thing, and they're literally getting picked up there. And the worst part about it is they're defending like covering up. And now we have the surge of kids getting kidnapped, of people getting robbed because they're imitating ICE agents. Because the ICE agent is saying, oh, I don't have to give you that. I don't have to give you a warrant. I don't have to give you identification. I don't have to give nothing. So what stops all these people from doing the same thing? We're going to have a sharp rise in this. It's just being kept really quiet. But it's already happening. It's already happening. And look how easy this is. I'm an ICE agent. I don't have to give you shit. How easy is it to get a plate carrier, a mask, and a gun? You know what I mean? And so they're just loading them up. They're picking up at schools. And already had instances of this. How are people like defending this? It boggles my mind. I'm just blown away by this. And I don't understand. If someone could please explain this to me, I would be willing to listen and just shut my mouth and listen to it. Please explain this to me, somebody. I don't get it.
When I worked in California, Anaheim, I'd never forget this. I was sitting at the table that morning, and people were talking about, the fucking Mexicans, and and these are firefighters. These are good men in their heart, but they've been drawn into what we're talking about, this propaganda. In this case, it was the Fox News propaganda. And, the fucking illegals, blah, blah, blah. And then I shit you not, in the same fucking conversation, I'd said, well, what are you up to today? Oh, I'm going to go down Home Depot and get myself some Mexicans to help me hang drywall. And I'm like, are you fucking joking? This is the problem. You have this complete double standard. And I was thinking the other day,
fucking hell.
Just, it's going to be crude, but it is what it is. Like, if anyone should be butthurt about illegal immigrations, it's someone like me who paid a lot of money to immigrate the air quotes right way. Because if you think about it, my son, for example, all he did to be an American was be born through his mother's vagina. Zero effort. He just bloop, that was it. He could have been Sudan, could have been Syria. He won the fucking jackpot and landed in Newport Beach, California. I had to go jump through the hoops, do AIDS tests, do background tests, show that I had X amount of money. But then I came from England. So I wasn't escaping, genocide, or, wasn't getting, the threat of honor killings or acid thrown in my face or anything else that some of these people, escaping the Haitian gangs that maybe don't have all this money at their fingertips to do it the right way. But you look at the backbone of America. It is immigrants. Some of them came from England and went through the correct red tape way and became firefighters like I did. And some of them had to kind of do the backdoor thing, and they became amazing, productive members of society. And I was their responder for a long time because Anaheim has a very large Mexican population. Hialeah, Florida, another place I work, very large Cuban population. Usually it's the first place people come, legally or illegally. That's where they land. And these are people that are working every day. So just like you, again, it's that middle common sense ground. If someone's coming here and they already have a bad background and or they've done something horrible here, no one is questioning that they get flung the fuck out of this country. But if they've come here, like we've seen, I saw one, I think if I've got this right, he's from South Korea originally, Purple Heart recipient under the U.S. forces. Yeah, just got fucking deported. Like, are you fucking kidding me? So this is my point, is that we've got people that have proven themselves. And what is the disadvantage of saying, we're going to grandfather you in, now you start paying taxes, now you don't have to hide and run from anyone anymore, and now you are, bona fide American. But it's that middle ground, because when you push extremism left and right over and over again, people lose the ability to critically think and go, oh, that guy was MS-13, like genuinely, not Photoshop. He's going back to El Salvador. This guy's worked in the farms in America for the last 15 years, and his child is now doing really well in middle school. We can keep that family here. I don't understand why people can't separate those two purely common sense ways of looking at this.
And again, the rights and protections that the Constitution allows once you're on U.S. soil, the right to free speech, you can be a tourist. You're still granted, if you're on U.S. soil, you don't understand that you still have the right to freedom of speech. You have these rights that are given to you while you're on U.S. soil. Again, due process. If somebody comes here and they're accused of a crime, they have the right to due process to defend themselves, right? And this is what I think aggravates people is, they're like, well, why don't you just, the worst thing, go back to where you came from. You know what I mean? And the thing is like, what burns me up is that we had 1,600 Afghans that helped U.S. forces that we were condemning, Biden for leaving some of them behind, that we literally fucking kicked them back. You know what I mean? We ended their protection and they're going back. What do you think is going to happen to them? And these are the people that put themselves and their families on the line, and they made it out and they thought they were safe. And now they're saying, nope, you're out. You're going back. You had a bunch of Haitians that were that are literally, they went through the process. They have their constitutional protections and they're being stripped of it. These are people that are hardworking immigrants. You know what I mean? And they've been the whole fucking lie about, they eat our pets. I mean, it was a joke, but it's not a joke anymore when you're actually deporting people like that. And it's disgusting. It's vile. I don't understand this. It's the same playbook that's been used for, and people kind of like constantly go back to like Nazis, but literally that was the entire playbook, to blame the immigrants, to blame them for that. It's unbelievable how people are so easily manipulated to believe something. And like, oh, well, just like Sanjun Park, right? He was in Nicaragua, Purple Heart recipient, been in for 50 years. His drug, he had a misdemeanor about like a drug addiction that was related to his PTSD. You know what I mean? So the system failed him on that. You know what I mean? And why can't we just like, what's he going to do in Korea? He doesn't even speak the language. He's been here for 50 years, and that's the thing is that, my father was an immigrant. He came here, he went into the Air Force. He got he got naturalized and he got his citizenship, and he worked for the government for 26 years. You know what I mean? And he's about as a patriot as anyone else. And he literally put anyone that says, I will put my life on this line for this country should definitely have like, okay, let's pump the brakes a second. Let's see what's going on. But they're not doing this. You know what I mean? They're literally going and like, you can deport yourself or we can do it for you. You have like 2 weeks. It's insane. How are we not like separating these two? And it's literally like, and again, I'm going back to, the people that are trying to do the right thing and in court, in immigration court, and they're literally picking them off from there because they have a quota to make. And this is the same piece of shit that's profiting off of it. He's doubled his stocks. They have proof of him. The Rolling Stones came out with an article just, I think, 2 days ago about him investing in Palantir before this whole thing started. And I don't understand it, man. If someone, again, I'm not the smartest guy, but please explain it to me. How does this benefit our society in a whole? You know what I mean? Because that's what it's supposed to do. But you have farmers that are losing their workers that have been working there for decades, And then because of the tariffs, they're not buying the soybeans. The USAID is cut off their assistance for that. So we have like the heart of the American society, our farmers that are struggling now, that are affected directly, but everyone just kind of ignores it. Like, well, it's because of that, because everyone has this tiny little bubble. And if it doesn't affect them in that bubble, well, they don't give a shit. All right. These damn immigrants. Guess what, motherfucker? You're an immigrant too. This entire country, the entire country is built off of immigrants. Some that didn't have a choice, and some that did. And the ones that did, especially like they're escaping something, most of the time it's from countries that we had destabilized and put a dictator to serve our interests for those corporations. South America, all these people, guess what? We fucked with them too. We have, like in the Middle East, we had Iraqis, Iranians, Lebanese, Palestinians. Guess what? We had a hand in all of that. So why is it that people have such short-term memory that they can't understand this? Is that, and again, we both are in agreement on this. We both understand this fully. We both agree that if you have gone through your due process, you have done something illegal, you have done something in violent crime, that it's not going to benefit society. You need to get the fuck out. And go get them. They need to go, by all means. Clean yourself up, try it again, whatever you need to do, but don't come here illegally, by all means, because you've had your due process. And I think no one that I've talked to that's on this topic of immigration, and either side is arguing that. But the only difference is that I'm saying, and most of the people that I talk to that are agree with me, they were talking about just giving them due process, right? That's the big thing. Just allowing them to have due process and let them have their time in court to do that. And especially if they came here and they went through the system, they're going through the system. And then they're saying like, oh, they're waving flags for foreign countries. Go back to that. Guess what? I was in D.C. last year, and I walked through like where all these politicians have their offices, and I see fucking Israeli flags in. Go fucking over there then. Fuck off. But let's say, like, again, you're promoting a fucking country that is committing genocide, and you're posting that up there, and it's literally taking from taxpayer money to fund, and you're posting it. And this motherfucker, what's that guy's name that they showed up in a foreign fucking military uniform? And he's supposed to be, how's he representing his fucking constituents? He's wearing a fucking IDF uniform. Dude, stupid fuck. I mean, honestly, that infuriates me, because how the fuck does that help anything that's happening with the U.S., benefiting our society? Wearing a foreign military uniform. It's horseshit. It doesn't make any sense. He should be fucking deported, not fucking part.
When I look back at what happened during COVID, again, which spans two, parties, Democrat, I think Trump initially, and then Biden after that. Again, it's the same thing. You couldn't have seen a more divisive time than, 2020, 2021. And I remember, again, standing in the middle going, what the fuck is going on? And, again, someone asked me why my Instagram was shut down. I just reconnected with Julian Pinot on there. And I was like, well, because I stood in the middle. And that's the most censored voice in America, is the common sense person that just stands in the fucking middle looking left and right going, what the hell is going on? Honestly, that's the one that gets shadow banned all the time and shut down. You can put porn and violence and extremism on social media and you'll get all kinds of fucking ratings. You sell all kinds of books. If you write a book on kindness and compassion and community, good luck. I tried it. But it's the same, that there was one truth in COVID. The healthier the population, the higher the chances of that population surviving a virus, period. Whether you believe it was a Chinese conspiracy, whether you believe it was something that only bubble wrap and a vaccine was going to get you out of, the truth is the healthier the human, the higher the survival rate, period. So if either side gave a fuck about the health of this population, if not before, certainly during and after COVID, we would have seen soda machines ripped out of schools, real food being cooked in cafeterias, PE programs and sports programs and music and drama being boosted back in schools, pedestrianizations of downtowns, public transport being boosted, all the local farmers being given subsidies rather than these mega farms to create organic food and grass-fed, livestock. Nothing. Not a fucking thing. So it was never about the health of the American people. If we wanted to address the mental health crisis and the addiction, then we would remove the ridiculous failed prohibition of drugs. And we would see, like Portugal, and we'd put it into the medical community, and we'd put in mental health counseling, addiction counseling, job creation, housing, and get these men and women back on their feet. So they were paying back into the country. They were a productive member of society. So it was never about us. It has never been about us. And until we have that awakening that no matter what color you adorn yourself with, every 4 years, they don't give a shit. And if you just take a step back, I used to teach my son this. My whole parenting thing was about, is it kind? Whether he was having a tantrum and throwing his toys, whether it was the way he was interacting with another kid, whatever it is what you're doing kind? And that helped, I hope, raise a pretty sweet young man that's about to turn 18 now. It's the same thing. Whatever you hear, is this A, going to benefit the country, or B, going to be detrimental? And so you are going to take a step back and realize that, oh shit, none of these fucking people actually have done anything that really benefits us. The communities, the people, the schools, the health, the farms, the quality of air, et cetera, et cetera. And until we have that awakening, then you reap what you sow. You're going to get the same shit bag every fucking 4 years with a different colored tie giving you the same bollocks.
Yep. You're absolutely right. And I think one of the things to add on to that is just we've been led to believe that, and I think this is one of the most detrimental things in our society is empathy is a weakness. I mean, that is in order to understand what's happening, you have to, those are the two things that I think is missing, is understanding and empathy. But we've become a society that, not all by any means, but if we have just even a minority is too much. You know what I mean? How is empathy a weakness? Trying to put yourself in their shoes, try to understand what they're going through. And people, instead of talking to them, and I think that's one of the hardest things is like engagement, just to have a conversation, but you're just trying to, you're lying to me. And I'm like, no, dude, like whatever I say, I do my research on this. And again, I may not like, what I find, because if I find like several sources that say the exact same thing, I'm like, you know what? I was wrong on this. And now I got no problem saying, you know what, bud? Hey, you were right. I was wrong. But this is the reason, because I hate saying that, is I do so much research on the things that I'm talking about to make sure that doesn't happen. I read books. Most of the, like, for example, in the Palestine issue, most of the authors, the books that I read are actually Israeli historians. You know what I mean? Because the news that I get like out of Haaretz, Times of Israel, you know what I mean? And so I understand the other side, but if I'm going to kind of fact check this, I need to go and find out the other side as well. And I try to understand the other side. I may not agree, but I try to understand. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the biggest things that is lacking, is just the lack of understanding and the lack of empathy, and how it's been turned into somehow that it's a form of weakness. I'm unapologetic. The fuck for? You know what I mean? Like, what does it cost you to say, and again, I think that goes back to like their ideology has become their identity, because, for them apologizing, it literally is something personal, something they don't want to ever have to say, because then they feel that it's like everything they say is wrong. No, I get dates wrong. I get people wrong. I misspeak sometimes, and I'm like, oh, no, you called me on that. Yes, you're right. I misspoke. My bad. You know what I mean? I just move on. But then I try to minimize that as much as possible by actually reading, you know what I mean? And doing my research, and not for confirmation bias, type research, but literally like go on both sides to see that. And the more that people will actually do that, the more they see that, what they're saying is completely just wrong. And I think they just don't want to have that realization. They'd rather stay in that tiny little bubble. They'd rather stay willfully ignorant than ever have to admit that, because it's like the end of their world on that. It's frustrating beyond belief. It's aggravating at times. But the one thing that kind of keeps me going personally is literally I had some guy on here that was literally just trolling me on my page, instant messages. And I just kind of like one day snapped at him, and like everything he said, I just blew it apart. I'm like, look this up. And I'm like, well, I didn't know that much about it. And I'm like, and so I kind of stepped back, took a deep breath, and I was like, okay, what don't you know? And I had this conversation with a complete stranger, someone I had no idea about. And before I knew it, he was like, well, I didn't know that. I didn't know this. I didn't know that. And so I'm like, here's a list of books, if you're really wanting to read on it, and if you really want to understand. And I gave him, whatever you need, whatever resources. And to this day, we're still kind of communicating back and forth. And again, I never met the guy, but it just takes that one time for someone to kind of give them a different perspective on things in order to change their mind. And I've been fortunate enough to actually encounter some of these people where I think they're a complete troll and they're wrong about everything. And I'm thinking, like, I'm not going to bash them for that, because maybe they just don't know. And again, trying to use that understanding and empathy. And like, if you've never been told anything else, if your bubble only contains that, it has that echo chamber, how are you ever going to know that, marijuana, there's never been any death recorded in history, with the use of marijuana? You know what I mean? And how people have replaced that with they replaced antidepressants with marijuana and used that instead. And how, like, the majority of law enforcement, they're like, nah, dude, if I get a call and they're drunk, I know it's going to be trouble. If I know they're smoking weed, I know they're going to be sitting there eating Cheetos going like, what, dude? They just literally want to just sit there and eat their Cheetos and watch TV. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be a much calmer night. But if they're drunk, then they know they're up for a fight. They know that's going to be problems. But a lot of people, they don't know that. And sometimes it takes a little bit of kind of breaking through that bubble and popping it through and just kind of getting through and just kind of like, hey, man, what don't you know? And sometimes they're willing, sometimes they're not. It's a roll of the dice. But I think it's worth it, honestly. I think it's worth it. Little by little, you can start changing minds and changing directions. And before you know it, we start to have this unity on this. And then, questioning authority, questioning question everything, for fuck's sake. It needs to happen. Ask me questions. I got no problem answering. It's when people like say, don't question this. That's the people you really have to look at. And that's the people that you really have to kind of dig into. When Trump's saying, like, don't ever, talk to me like that. Don't ever ask me that. How ridiculous is that? That's a stupid question. And they fail to answer that. Yeah, they're probably hiding something.
Speaking of changing your mind, I was kind of reflecting on the Bible. I'm not a devout Christian, but that was the religion that I was raised with. So it's the book that I'm most familiar with. But when you think about mental health and post-traumatic growth, you have the Old Testament, eye for an eye, and then you have this rebirth, like kindness, compassion, turn the other cheek. And so we have a pretty good, selection of holy doctrine, as well as, ancient wisdom from other areas that give us a pretty good roadmap on what to do, what not to do. I would be able to sum it up pretty much. Don't be a dick is pretty much what it says. But you're talking about where is compassion and empathy and kindness and community in a country that beats its chest so much about its religion. I struggle to understand why people don't ask that question that they throw out all the time. What would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? Would he say that Narcan was wasted on drug addicts? Would he shoo homeless people to a different jurisdiction? Would he hunt down elementary kids and throw them back to the country they came from, even though they fled it because of the drug prohibition that we created? I don't think so. So my question to you is, in supposedly such, and I'll just stay with Christianity because what I know, Christian nation with a very kindness, compassionate based, New Testament, Jesus, etc. Why is there such a disconnect between the book they supposedly read, but actually not enacting what this very prophet would have done if he was here today in 2025?
That's a great question. I read the KGV and the NIV back to back. And don't get me wrong, there's some really good poetry in there. There's some things that definitely people can benefit off of. But I think the problem is when people cherry pick things, and I found myself doing that too. I mean, there was a point in time where I was completely like anti-theist, and then atheist, and then I started actually meeting atheists that believed in ghosts, and I'm like, nope, I can't really accept that either, because I don't believe in anything supernatural. So I just kind of left it at, I'm just one of those people. I don't believe in anything supernatural. I don't know what label that is. But when you have a society that, and you just said it, I don't know if you misspoke, but we're actually not a Christian nation. We're a secular nation. And I think that is, and I, even as someone who doesn't believe and doesn't have any religion, I will fight tooth and nail for your right to have it, because I think that's what allows the protections for all of them. So when people isolate and say, and they create this ideology based off their theology that conforms to their way of life, or what they feel should be a way of life, I think that's the biggest problem. And when you have people like Kenneth Copeland that, makes, I think the last time I read about it, he was making $320 million a year, has 3 private jets, his own airport. And I know this because he's in Fort Worth, not even like an hour and a half from where I live. People are manipulated through that. It becomes a business. And so when it becomes a business, what has been the biggest seller in recent history is selling fear mongering, right? And so when you constantly like preach like the prophecy, end of times, and well, I speak of war, or possibility of war. Well, give me a time when they haven't. There's always been talk of war, or, war or talk of war. So it's very vague and ambiguous for a reason. There isn't a single prophecy that isn't vague and ambiguous, and that's done on purpose so you can interpret it that way. And I'm not by any means, siding with any religion. There's extremists on all sides, but in the U.S. particularly, honestly, if you're going to swindle people out of their money, it's people get swindled out of a lot of businesses. You know what I mean? But that's exactly what they are. They're businesses. If you are, you're receiving tax-free for making, like Joel Osteen was making, I read this in 2019, he was making 97 million a year, with only 1.2 going toward actual charities and into the community, and everything else being administrative fees and so forth, especially when they find like $400,000 in the wall in cash. We should be sending all the, and remember they passed that law, I forgot where it was, but where homeless people couldn't sleep outside, and they were going to be fined or arrested if they were sleeping in public areas. Well, sure, make that the law, but have them go to the church, because that's what they're there for. That's what they're preaching. You know what I mean? They're like, yeah, we do good for the community. Okay, well, prove it. They should be audited. And if you're making $330 million a year and there's still homeless people in your area, well, guess what? Either you contribute to that, like you said, you preach about, or you don't get taxed. I think that's, more than fair. And I'm not just talking about any religion. I'm talking about one religion specifically. I'm talking about any religion that preaches that. If you're making that much money, and you're not getting audited, and only like a small percentage, like 2% of your profits, what you're making tax free, goes to helping the society, that's no longer a charitable contribution that you're making to society. That's literally you're profiting off of it. If you got 3 private jets in your own airport, for fuck's sake, dude. I mean, why are we even discussing it? Why aren't they being audited for what they say in their if you want to sell, what was it? What's the one, that crazy chick that's the faith office for Trump? She was speaking in tongues, the blonde lady.
I don't know her
On
name.
Passover, she was selling a personal angel for $1,000 out of the White House. You know what I mean? And she's literally got her office, the faith office in the White House, and she's selling personal angels for $1,000. These are, how is this like an acceptable? Again, if you want to do this, okay, but again, you should be classified as a business and fall under those regulations as well. And if you don't produce what you're saying, and if people are not satisfied with it, you should be able to get your money back. Or selling, bottled water that's, holy water, I guess what it is, guess what? You should be taxed on it as well, because again, you're making a profit off of this. You see what I mean? So if people want to give their money to a certain organization because they feel it's doing well, and I'm not going to stop them. I'm not saying that, we should stop them from doing it, even though they're harming themselves or their family by giving them everything that they have and not looking in any direction. I think it's wrong, but it doesn't matter what I think in this aspect, where if it's a business for them and if they're profiting that much, then either they need to be audited and taxed, and then held accountable to that. No, actually, that's it. They either need to be, they just need to be taxed on it and treated like a business. No, or they should be treated like a business and audited. And if they're not doing what they say they're doing, helping the society, then guess what? They need to be held accountable for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I misspoke when I said Christian nation. I think what I was referring to is some people project us as a Christian nation, even though we are multicultural, 100%.
And we're definitely a Christian majority, no doubt. We have so many faiths in there, and this is like one of the big things. Like, when they want to put the Old Testament in the classrooms, like, why? Like, how does that benefit? Why don't we? How does that benefit the students by having it up there? And it literally says, in the first commandment, the first commandment goes against the First Amendment and vice versa. You know what I mean? You shall no worship no other God than me. Well, the First Amendment literally says we shall not respect any other religion above any other. You see what I mean? So it's contradicting. So when people say God and country, I don't believe that whatsoever. Again, my highest authority is the Constitution. And in the Constitution, there's absolutely no mention of God. There's no mention of Jesus. And they did that on purpose. You see what I mean? And so, and this is why I'm like such a hardcore believer in the Constitution, because again, that's my highest authority. This is what I abide by. And this can, literally violates the First Amendment on there, and it shouldn't be there. It doesn't benefit the student whatsoever. It literally offends, people that have other religions. And this is the whole reason why we were kind of established is, to escape from religious persecution. That was one of the big things of the founding fathers. And when we violate that ourselves later on and don't understand that, and again, the understanding and empathy are gone, I think this is the result of that. This is what you get when you take those things away. Is you have like an imposition of someone else's religion. If you are a Christian and you tell me, you know what, that goes against my religion, like, you know what, I respect that. Cool, no problem. But if you say you can't do that because of my religion, now we got a fucking problem. Go fuck yourself. I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I have a lot of Muslim friends. I have a lot of Christian friends. I have Hindu friends. I have atheist friends. I got all different types, and my Muslim friends don't tell me not to eat pork. You know what I mean? It's their choice. I'm not going to force it on them, but they're not going to tell me what I should do. And no Christian's going to tell me what I should do either. It's just, that's your belief. That's your personal relationship with God. And I respect that by all means. I don't necessarily respect the religion just because I'm not religious at all. But you as a person, I try to, at least, until you start, spouting off shit like that. And that's where we kind of like start creating this disconnect and so forth. But if that's your religion, that's what you want to believe in, by all means. If it's not harming yourself or anyone else by believing in it, okay, by all means.
How do we get people to circle back round to we the people, circle round to love thy neighbor, we are God's children, whatever, again, the phrases that you really resonate with that go back to that tribalism, that, the village that we grew up in, the kind of community that we've allowed to be completely ripped from us. How, if you were king for a day, president for a day, whatever you want to call it, how would you start rebuilding the community and putting it back to, as you alluded to, the very vision that our forefathers had, or our founding fathers had, 200-300 years ago?
It's definitely not through religion. And the reason I say this is that, in the U.S. alone, we have 240 different denominations of Christianity. We have 44,000 globally. And even within, if you talk to some of the Protestants, especially, some people I know, they're shit talking about Catholics. They're like, they're not Christians. Like, well, all Catholics are Christian, not all Christians are Catholic. And every religion, I think, has their problems, has their extremists. There's no doubt about it. This guy, Adam Shaver, the one that was literally crucified, a pastor. Right, he was a Jewish Zionist extremist. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you have, and the guy that was in Florida that massacred at the gay club. You know what I mean? You have extremists on either side. I'm not calling. You can't take the actions of someone like that. Of like Timothy McVeigh had the Turner Diaries. And which was calling, it was a Christian extremist far right wing calling for like the Civil War, and that was supposed to create it, right? So you have extremists on both sides, but that's not a representation of the majority of people, right? It's just not. And bringing it back to the Constitution, I think is, and this is the hardest part, is having that understanding and having that empathy. If your religion, if you feel that your religion is violated, right, by someone stepping on your beliefs, well, if you're saying that you shouldn't be treated the same because you're Muslim, well, imagine how that would be if it was reversed, right? If you're feeling like the rules and laws are written for Christians, and somehow just say hypothetically, the Muslims, start becoming the majority and they take away your rights, how would you, respond to that? And most of them would say violently. And I'm like, well, do you think that's the right answer? Because right now that's what's happening to them. And do you think it's right for them to respond violently? You know what I mean? And when you take the same question, kind of flip it back on them, I think that's when you really get through to them, if they're able to listen and comprehend what you're saying and not just dismiss it right away, because I'm not saying everything they want to hear. And to say like all Muslims are bad people, that's fucking horrible. It's just the same thing of saying, that all Christians are bad people, just because, you had, a cannibal, what was it? The guy in Florida in Tampa, that was he was the puppeteer, the Christian puppeteer, had the after school program. And he was literally arrested, and he was going to eat the kids, and that was his plan. But he had like all this child pornography, and that's not a representation of the mainstream Christians. You know what I mean? And most of them are good people. And same thing with all the religions, and I think especially the Abrahamic religions for the majority. And the crazy part is, what I saw that actually surprised me is that every protest that I went to that was pro-Palestinian, I met a rabbi there. That blew my mind. I was like, I wasn't expecting this. And I seem, I like to consider myself somewhat educated and knowledgeable in the things that are happening, but that took me off by surprise. And the thing is that they were just like, you're not going to use our religion against these people, because that's not what it teaches us. And so I was like, I was really taken back by that. And I really appreciated their stance on this, because this is not easy. It's literally like, they're probably getting more shit on them than anybody else, because they feel like they're betraying them, and they're going against it, but they're standing firm. And I find that absolutely incredible. That's amazing. And so much respect to them. but I think it just has to go back to the very basics of just and understanding and empathy. And I think that's why so many people are literally pushing that false narrative that empathy is a weakness, that empathy is and understanding is like something that you need to do away with. Um, and I honestly think that once we actually can put that back in, um, hell, like Mr. Rogers was actually really good at teaching that. You know what I mean? And I think we need like another Mr. Rogers or Carl Sagan that need to kind of like be pushed up again. You know, education needs to be, you know, when you don't understand why Black people are so upset, you know, with the things that are happening, you don't have any understanding and you don't have any empathy. Try putting yourself in their shoes and see what it's like. You know, every traffic stop, you know, it could be your life. I'm not exaggerating on this, and I'm not being, dramatic about it. It's literally what happens. Where I got to feel that was when I was in Palestine. You know, where every time we got stopped, like that guy's already pointing a gun at me, and how would that make you feel if you were in those shoes? Especially with the past that's been created on that. You know, the renaming of the statues that are up, or the renaming the military bases, all from people that literally from the Confederacy, that the only reason for them being famous were literally because there were generals in the Confederacy. And it wasn't like they named them like during the Confederacy or after. We're talking like 60, 70 years after then we're glorifying them. You know what I mean? What's part of a history? Well, we have a lot of things in our history that we don't need to glorify them. And I think people just don't understand that. And why would that be offensive? Because you have people that literally are, that some have generational, I mean, millions that were brought here against their will. And they've been here for generations and they've experienced this firsthand, you know, where it's literally the constant, targeting of people because of their skin color. And the assumption that they're always going to be a criminal, you know, that they're not educated, which is, I mean, some of the smartest people I know are brown people and darker brown people. And that's the thing, is that it's such a false narrative that people push, you know, when it's ridiculous. And I think the biggest thing is education, and empathy and understanding. Those are the three key things that I find that are missing the most. Because a lot of things that we've had were whitewashed, you know, for the longest time. And we don't, with the Tulsa massacre, I didn't find out about that till like 4 years ago. Why the fuck did I'm 46 years old when I first found out about that? Like, how ridiculous is this? And I feel ashamed of myself. Like, how did I, but I didn't know. They didn't teach us that in school. Why not? Why don't we see, why don't, one of the things in Christopher Columbus's diaries is saying, like, yes, we landed here and the people are the nicest, most welcoming. They fed us, they clothed us, they gave us their women, they did everything for us, and they'll make great slaves. Mm-hmm. Why weren't we taught that? You know what I mean? It's just, and again, I think it's just that pushing that narrative is what keeps people under control, because of the ignorance that they have. And sometimes it's willful, sometimes it's not. But I'm not trying to insult people by saying ignorance. I'm saying they don't know. You know what I mean? A lot of people find that word offensive. I'm just like, well, you don't know about it, so you're ignorant, you know. But it's something offensive. I'm just saying, but if you're willfully ignorant, that's different. Yes, that is offensive. Hopefully you can take that and understand that I'm actually offending you.
It's funny you said about slavery, because we had a kind of just a query in my head. I'm like, let me look up the UK at the height of slavery, because on the other side of this, and the other enemy to compassion and empathy and us coming together, is the white people are, everything is white people's fault, and I'm owed all this because I have this pigmentation. That's the other side of this conversation if we're talking about extremism. And so I'm like, all right, let me look. When slavery was at its height, and the British slavers were, buying from the African tribes who were selling either their own people or other tribes that they captured, giving them to the Brits, and then we would basically hand them off to the Americans, take tobacco or whatever, and then go back to England clean-handed. I don't know what you're talking about. What is slavery? England was at some of its poorest times in history then. So this is the other thing, we're talking about that division is most white people did not benefit from slavery in any way, shape, or form. And people might say, oh, yeah, but, through time, it's like, no, but no one put their hand up and said, yes, I would love to go and enslave some people so I could have an iPhone. That'd be amazing. No, the farmers, the blacksmiths, the bakers, they were just going about their day, regardless of what was going on thousands of miles. It was just a few people making a shitload of money while everyone else continued to starve. So we've also got to realize this has happened over and over and over and over again. And even with the slavery thing, it's not even pigmentation. If they happen to be orange or purple or blue, as long as they could work for free, they didn't give a fuck what they look like. So, we've got to also realize like it's 2025, we got to recalibrate and realize that it's the greed, hungry, despicable few that fuck it up for everyone else. But if they keep us divided and keep saying, oh, black people, white people, and everything, then we're going to perpetuate this lie. But I mean, are there incidences where even in modern society there is that racism? Of course. But I think it's a minority now. So it's up to, again, the middle majority that we keep talking about to stand up and say, enough is a fucking enough, man. I just went to my son's high school graduation. It was an absolute spectrum of colors and religions. And these incredible kids were graduating with honors. They were joining the military. They were in dual enrollment programs. Like this community of children, they've been on the track team with my son. Like it is absolutely, this is America. This is America. So that other extremist narrative needs to stop as well, where it's like, racism is the backbone of America, and it's fucking not. It's the few toxic people that we've got to all see, all of us side by side, and start getting rid of them.
I agree to a point. I don't think it's the backbone of America. I still think that there is definitely racism that's alive and well. Now, would it be like directly apparent? Maybe not. Now, are all like white people racist? Definitely not. Are the majority? No, they're not. But I still think that it is alive and well. And when we talk about white privilege, it's not that we are the ones that have created that. It's not our fault. It's just how society is. But I do believe that, that racism is still around. Islamophobia is still around, and I don't think it's gotten any worse. I think it's just become more widely known that it's happening. Like, for example, like, until like in the mid 50s, they were saying that, it was like so many, people that were left-handed, riders. It was, what was that example? Like, it was left-hand riders that were, they didn't know like how many there were. All of a sudden, did a study on like how many there were, and then they realized, well, they didn't realize, how many left-hand riders there were until they did the study. So it's one of those things where, if you look at the population in prison, in comparison to how many, black people there are to how many people are in prison, it's overwhelming. You know what I mean? Especially Absolutely. The black and brown. And because we have, the 25% of the global population that's imprisoned in the United States currently, and the majority of that is minority groups, comparatively to what the population is in general. Not saying, because the majority of people in prison are white, but if you look at in comparison to the population statistics, per capita, that changes drastically on that. And now, do we blame everybody on slavery? No, we don't. That I agree with you, like to that point where, but is it still something that is alive and well, especially like in law enforcement system? I still think there is a lot of, if not, I still think there's prejudice in that by full extent. People making assumptions that they're criminals just because of the color of their skin. I'm saying, oh, law enforcement are racist? Absolutely fucking not. You know what I mean? Do I think all black people are innocent of everything? No. If they commit a crime, by all means, you know what I mean? But we have instances where we have these juvenile detention centers that are filled with 100% with minority groups, with black kids, and they're literally like, when they started investigating it, I think there was I was watching John Oliver actually, and he brought up one instance in Louisiana where there was a judge that literally was making up laws in order to incarcerate them, and literally making up laws.
That's how drug prohibition was started. The whole reefer madness thing. It was a guy basically justifying his job after the failed alcohol prohibition. So he made
Yeah,
up laws.
yeah. But it's 2025. You know what I mean? And I go, why aren't we past that still? And the thing is that, well, how does that? If you look to the why again, the origin. If we look for the cause instead of the effect, we have the effect that that they're committing crimes. Well, why is that? And with a couple of low income, well, why is that? It's like, yes, we since the civil rights, but the civil rights didn't come until 1964. You know what I mean? And so it's one of those things where we had segregation, we had that, and once we had civil rights, did all of that end? You know what I mean? Of course not. It's just, it was on the books saying that you can't do that, but this still happened. I think one of the saddest things I saw was so Senator Inoue from Hawaii. He was the one-armed senator. And this guy was the Medal of Honor recipient, and he was part of the 442nd. So the 442nd had the highest amount of Medal of Honor recipients in the history of the U.S. military. If you ever read up on him, it's insane what he did. They sent him all to Germany, and basically, like, he took out like 3 or 4 gunner positions that were like entrenched in there. 2 of them with one arm. He literally grabbed his arm, fucking stuck it in his back, his backpack, and just kept charging through with one arm. You know what I mean? To me, that just blows my mind. And the thing is that he took them out, and once he took them out, he took the injured, and I think he saved like 4 people on the way back. This is insane to me. This is someone that absolutely should be on the Medal of Honor. Doesn't even cut it. I mean, and the thing is that he came back to the U.S. and one of the saddest things I heard is that he came in full uniform with the Medal of Honor on to go get a haircut, and he was literally like, "No, we don't serve your kind here." You know what I mean? And for again, this is World War II. But at the same time, how is that? We had internment camps in the U.S. So this is still people, and he just recently passed. It wasn't like ancient history where like 200 years ago. We're talking about like within our lifetimes where I saw him on TV. You know what I mean? I was like, oh shit, he's got one arm. You know what I mean? And so we're not talking about an ancient past. We're talking about the times that were there. We're talking about the last lynchings from the KKK were like in 1981. You know what I mean? And so when we say and dismiss this as like, oh, that's ancient history, that ended like during the Civil War or whatever that is. No, I mean, it's alive and well, not as much, not as apparent, but I still believe, yeah. I mean, again, the last lynching from the KKK was in 1981. This isn't ancient. This is during my lifetime. You know what I mean? And, the Jasper draggings in Texas, and this is all racially motivated. Mm-hmm. So is it as widespread? No, it's definitely not as widespread as it was. But is that mentality still entrenched in there? I mean, is it? No, but we still have, these cases of that, and it's still alive and well. It's just not as apparent, and it's not as widespread as it used to be. But I still believe that, yeah, it's that there is a lot of racism still going along. No, it's not the backbone of America. But if someone from they use people from the Black community as like, oh, see, we had a Black president, we had this, we had that. They're the exception, not the rule, though. And so as long as it stays that way, I think that's a determination of the racist factor that we have in the U.S. I'm probably going to get a lot of backlash from that, but I stand true until someone can prove me otherwise. that, that the education system in primarily Black areas is much lower, right? We have, the opportunities that they have is much lower. This whole DEI thing that people are, why would you take that? And it's pushed by the government. Like when they were taking down all the people that were like Medal of Honor recipients off the Army pages, you know what I mean? This is where it's still, you see it, it's still alive there. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're taking them off the pages and not giving them credit for it, I mean, that's beyond wrong. That's demonstrably wrong, and how could you possibly do that to people that literally serve their country while they're still being hated when they come back home, while they couldn't be served at the same table at that same time? And these are people that I've met. You know what I mean? So it's not having, and if it's people that like are if they equate, like if they have, and I think people just misunderstand like this whole, what it is you have 70 applicants and you have 5 of them that are Black and they all have the same score. Well, shouldn't they have a chance for that as well? You know what I mean? It's not that they're getting special treatment. It's not that they're having, but if they're not able to have the same opportunities, for example, like the education and so forth, then that we're not doing this right. You know what I mean? And it's a systematic problem. And it's, again, I don't think it's widespread, but I think it definitely is a problem that's still alive and well.
Well, I think if you got a country of 330 million, if you think about that extremist 10%, that's 33 million people. So it's a lot of people, and I think it would seem like a lot, but the thing is, why are the middle 80% so quiet? The almost 3 million of us need to stand up and be louder. And again, like even with the diversity thing, you'll hear a lot of kind of animosity for the affirmative action when it came to hiring, because you'd have someone who happened to be Caucasian and they did all the right things and they trained hard and they prepared. And in some hiring, they were like, no, we need X amount of people of this color, whatever it is. And they, maybe didn't have the same score as the other person. But the other side of the conversation, as you said, is that, but did that person have the opportunity to train like that and be educated in the first place? So this is where I think, again, the middle conversation, if you want to put diversity in the fire service, we've got a friend, Chris Hickman, who started a mentorship program here in Ocala, and they provide free mentorship. I think it's 3 times a week. They put it, kind of closer to the poorer area. So they will, equip these kids. They will teach them. There are scholarships to the fire academy. So rather than scooping up a bunch of people from their skin color, they say, hey, underserved population, there's the bar. Let's try and get you to that point, because A, you're going to reach it and you're going to be a phenomenal firefighter. B, you'll go, you know what, this isn't for me. Or C, you'll try, you don't make it, and then be like, all right, I'm going to move to do something else. Now you actually have a true, spectrum of your society. But what we did with this whole, pendulum thing is it went from no one was getting hired if they were of any color other than white, to all of a sudden these affirmative action hires, of which some were phenomenal firefighters. But the chance of you getting the wrong kind of person when you lower bars or whatever it is higher, which then perpetuates more animosity. In the middle now, as you said, there are just identifying that there are groups that do not have the same chances as other groups because of where they were born. Again, bloop, I'm an American. Yeah, but which area code am I in? Which street am I born into? Am I in a freaking Crip neighborhood in South Central, or am I in Beverly Hills? 2 very different shoots. So I think, again, that compassion, empathy is like, what is the actual issue? Like our school system, if you aren't, don't do well, you get penalized. Finland's school system, if you're a struggling school, you get extra help. So but until we stop this kind of World War I trench thing of like, racism from the whites, racism from the blacks, or whatever it is, we're not just going to come in the middle and go, well, what is the fucking problem? What is the root of the problem? All right, these assholes we get every 4 years. Check, they're a problem. The poverty here, because I've been in lots of struggling neighborhoods where they're Caucasian, and there's, rampant crime, and they wouldn't really feel like they were going to be a firefighter. So what is the underlying issue? And I think that's why we have to pull everyone together.
I agree with that.
Until they stop us fighting with each other, we're never going to get to the root of this, and we're always going to be at war, whether it's in a neighborhood, red and blue, or whether it's in different countries.
I think one of the big things that, especially like in the special operations community, that comes up a lot is like women in special operations, and so especially like being around like the CrossFit community and jiu-jitsu community, and once you realize that there's some freaking women out there that can just outperform you in every aspect, you just kind of like, oh shit. One of the conversations I have with people, especially with in jiu-jitsu, is I am so glad that I got my, there was a girl, I was a white belt at the time. I was, and she was a blue belt, and her name was Snowdine. I met her down in Austin, and she was like, "Hey, do you want to roll?" And yeah, man, no problem. But it was like, yeah, I want to roll. And the crazy part is that my mentality going in there, I was like, she's not going to beat me. I'm a man. You know what I mean? I literally came in with that mentality, and I truly believed it, because I'm superior, because I'm stronger. I'm a man. I'm taller. I have more strength. I'm going to beat her. And the cartoon where like Tom and Jerry, where he gets in the fight with the bulldog, right? And you have nothing but smoke, and he's like trying to get out and gets pulled back in. That was our round for like 6 minutes. I was running for my life. Like everything I did, she shut down. She went around. She was like just on me, just like, it was just crazy. Like everything I did was just get shut down. And I was in my mind, I'm going, help, shit, fuck, God damn it, get off, fucking trying to get her off. And the thing is that, I was so out of breath, and I was like, my face was flustered, and she just kind of like, that's round, thanks. And I just went on to the next one. And I was like, oh, appreciate it. And she turned around, holy shit. I was in pain for fucking days because I just didn't want to tap. My elbow was hyperextended. My neck felt cranked up. But I'm so happy that I got that round so early on in my career. And and to me, I'm like, I'll never underestimate a woman ever again. But for like in the special operations, to me, if we have a standard that needs to meet, male or female, if you meet that standard, you should be in. Bottom line, if you meet the standard, we're not going to change the standard. But if you meet that standard, what is the problem? I don't understand that. Like they're like, oh, well, women are psychological. No, the horseshit. I've met some nasty women before. You know what I mean? Like they're worse than some men. And the thing is that, and we're talking about physical boundaries again. If they meet the standard, like, what is the problem with it? I don't find anything wrong with that, because we have shitbags in every branch. In every branch of spot, and we have in CAG, in SF, in Rangers. Shit slips through the cracks sometimes, and you're going to have a shitbag in every branch. It doesn't matter. So if someone actually is there, and I say someone specifically because I don't want to say male or female, if they make the standard and they make the cut, you're in. Just leave it at that. And give them, if they make the same standard as everyone else, what is the problem with that? And you have these discussions constantly in there, and there's more and more, especially like you mainly have it from like the older generation, like the boomer generation, but the Gen X and the millennials, it's like, if they make the standard, that's it. Just leave it at that. You know what I mean? And I encourage women to go do that, because guess what? They probably do a lot better at like humid, intel gathering and so forth in some places that, other people, they wouldn't expect it. You know what I mean? They're on I don't blend anywhere, for fuck's sake, dude. I go there and they're like, yeah, I was doing a surveillance and counter surveillance course. And they're like, yeah, you're staying in the car. You'll do that, but you're not walking around. You don't blend in anywhere. And they're absolutely right. The women in that course, they did phenomenal. You know what I mean? And the thing is that if they make the standard, leave it at that. Bottom line.
100%. I've always said this. The beautiful thing about the fire service is if we're in a fire, so we're wearing all our gear, there's only one prejudice. They either can or they can't. You can sure as shit see the person who's terrible at their job when they're wearing their gear, but you can't tell if it's a gay, male, straight, trans or whatever. That it's a good firefighter or it's a bad firefighter. It's the only, and that's a prejudice that should be there because that is that standard. I want to be mindful of your time. We've been talking for 2 hours now, but just one more area, because this is, again, this relates, rounds off to what we've been talking about this last part. Again, black and white. When we talk about Israel at the moment, that entire country is really kind of being held at what's being done by this certain group of people in Gaza. I would imagine the same as Russia, the same as all these other places, that there's a majority of people that either are just kind of neutral or vehemently opposed to this. I would hope it would be the latter, that just aren't being given a voice at the moment. So in your kind of, readings and explorations, talk to me about the kind of the resistance voice in Israel of these atrocities happening under their flag.
So one of the big things that I've realized is that, and this has become more apparent the more I kind of dig in, is that every accusation, every accusation is actually a confession. So you have, I've seen several videos and not just of like kids in schools being brought up to hate them and that they're terrorists and they only want bad things, but you have people on the street. And I think it's a generational thing. And again, one of the biggest things is when you have that, then you're going to have a society that's the problem. If you take Netanyahu out of the problem, out of the picture, you're still going to have people like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, right? And Ben-Gvir literally by their own Israeli courts got convicted of terrorism, right? And he wasn't able to serve the IDF because he's that far extremist, but he's still a politician. He still has a voice in the far right party. So when you have people like that and you have a society like that, and when 83%, there was a Haaretz poll that was done, 83% of the Israeli population it agrees that Gaza should be just completely annihilated, destroyed, taken over. Well, that's no longer a president, a leader, a prime minister that's saying this. And once he's taken out, that's literally a society that's saying this. You know what I mean? I think that's one of the biggest problems. Are all Israelis bad? No, I'm not saying that. But the overwhelming majority, that believes that these people are second-class citizens, that they're terrorists, that they should lose their home, and that that is a societal issue. You know what I mean? They've been brought up to believe that. And I don't think they've ever had any accountability because they always had that shield of utilizing, what's happened at the Holocaust. Like, oh, you're anti-Semitic or you're a Holocaust denier. And they try to throw that out to end the conversation. And I think that's one of the biggest problems is that, they're not held accountable. The U.S. has used more veto power to defend Israel than any other instance in the history of the UN. They literally have. Now, when you have these issues like that, where they're actually like no accountability, you're literally getting away with murder. Right now, you have IDF soldiers that are on TikTok, and you have that shitbag Destiny going over there and saying, "Oh, stop putting on TikTok," trying to give them defense for that because they're utilizing it against them. Because it's a fucking war crime. That's why. You know what I mean? Like, and he's like, "Oh, just keep it down. Don't publicize that." When you have that mentality, when you have like no accountability, and again, if they want to pick a fight with all the world, especially like in the Middle East, and they don't have the funding to do that, and now they're starting to, what I'm happy about is that they picked on a country that fought back. You know what I mean? They attacked Iran. They weren't expecting what they did, and they sent in lobbing missiles, and they still had our help to defend that. Right? They still had they destroyed some of the missiles that were coming in, but a lot of them made it through. And now they're the Palestinians. They're not running anywhere. You know what I mean? They're staying to defend their land because they feel they belong there. If you see right now, what's happening is that remember when especially in the beginning of the war, they were saying, oh, they're launching missiles from hospitals and schools and everything else. There's little actual video footage of them launching missiles from the middle of Tel Aviv. You see what I mean? So everything that they were accusing the Palestinians of doing and Hamas doing, they're literally doing themselves. And they're targeting hospitals, they're targeting schools, you're saying that every single hospital, there was like a military command center under there. The Harvard statistic, or last year, Lancet was the medical journal. This is an independent verification. They estimated between 187,000. If you fast forward to today, Harvard came up with an estimate just recently that there's like 330,000 casualties, that happened there. And Hamas is only this is coming from Israel. The armed branch of Hamas is only like 30,000. So right now we have like 65,000 that's completely accounted for, but we have all these estimates coming from third parties, that are showing otherwise, and they're targeting journalists, they're targeting medical personnel, and these are coming from the people on the ground that literally from the UK, from the US, that are saying, yeah, we got kids with bullet holes in their heads. These are, and it's happening so much, but who's holding them accountable, right? And they're like, and you have the people that in Israel that are saying that they are that all Palestinians are terrorists because they're going to grow up to be terrorists. And they have that mentality. So I think it's a societal problem that has been ingrained for so long. They've been taught to hate. I mean, and so when Iran started bombing them, you saw people on the beach that were like, oh, no, we're going to get to our bomb shelters. And one of the things that you saw commonly happen is that they weren't allowing non-Jews into the bomb shelters. That's a societal problem. That's no longer just like, the politicians making, the determination of like what should be done. It's literally like the society saying, no, we're not allowing you. When Israel doesn't have borders by design, so they continually expand the illegal settlements that are happening. They just approved like 21 more, and this has been the most violent year in the West Bank. Hamas is not in the fucking West Bank. They're not in control there. These are illegal Israeli settlers that are going there and burning homes, that are killing Palestinians, backed up by the IDF. And I saw that firsthand when I was there. There was a farm, and there was a brand new Israeli settlement that had been built there, and they would go in at night. And I was there, and I have pictures of the burnt fields. Right, they would burn their fields, and they literally have the IDF soldiers that were accompanying them. The day after we left, they did a raid in that area, and 30 Palestinians were taken into the detention center. So now we're talking about you don't have to talk about the hostages anymore, right? Because it was never about the hostages. It never was. It was all about the same thing. They just wanted to level Gaza. And they did this systematically. They've been doing this. And they little by little have been taken over. The problem with this is that it's now people aren't buying their bullshit anymore, right? The entire world is seeing, and the entire world is starting to condemn them. And the people that are literally like holding on the tightest is the U.S. more than anything else. We're literally like the big bully that is defending the loudmouth friend, right? They're going in, picking a fight, and then running behind him because they wouldn't be doing the shit if they didn't have the money for the missile systems that they've been using, right? And they're saying, well, they keep lobbying. There's regulations for a prison in the United States where you can't have a house literally right outside the prison, right? Why would that be? For the safety of the fucking community, right? But in Gaza, they walled them off, and then they have all these settlements literally within feet, right? Within a couple hundred feet of that wall. And so those are the human shields. You see what I mean? Because these people that are being oppressed in there, and they have autonomous weapons pointing in, right? And they have bombings, and they were saying, there was peace in Gaza before that. No, they still had to control the water. They had to control the air. They controlled the sea. They weren't allowed to leave without having like lines and lines of like cattle, being rushed in there. They're constantly being dehumanized. They had air raids. I think it was like September 23rd of 2023. They bombed the shit out of the West Bank and in Gaza. Right? Like the month of September, there was the highest amount of death between January 1st and in September 2023. There was the highest amount of Palestinians killed in like 2 decades. And this is in the West Bank. So, but these people don't hear that. And they don't hear about, the bombing raids that they're doing. And again, they're walled in a 25 by 5 area. Where the fuck are they going to go? And the most densely populated area in the world, which has, and by the way, and that the most like the thing that sets me off about more than anything else is when people bring up Hollywood, right? Oh, they're making this up. It's fake. It's whatever. They have the highest amount of children amputees in the entire world than any conflict in the 21st century, or excuse me, in the 20th century, right? In the last like 125 years, the highest amount of amputee children in any conflict, and especially such a short amount of time. How the fuck are you going to, fake that? You know what I mean? They just want to believe something else. And this is where I think one of the biggest problems is. And this is an entire society that's been believed that they are somewhat just, and that this land was promised them 2,000 years ago. And it's becoming a running joke now. The one thing I'm happy about seeing is people seeing through that bullshit. And again, I don't support Iran. I think that any type of theocracy is dangerous, including Israel's. But when you have a theocracy, it's only going to end bad. And I'm not supporting the Iranian government. By all means, I support the people in there because they don't have that choice, right? They any type of dissent has been crushed, and that's one of the biggest problems. So I'm not supporting the government of Israel, but bombing the civilians isn't really going to help in either case. Not in Gaza, not on the West Bank, not in Tehran. And they got to get out of that. They got to stop doing that. And I think they should be held accountable, just like anybody else. And if we actually hold, Iraq to that standard where we went in where they had only so many, like 17 violations, and Israel has 34, they should be held accountable. Why don't we should be, if they're able to have nuclear weapons, they should have to sign the non-proliferation treaty. They should have inspections. They should be able, again, held accountable for that. And that's, I think, one of the biggest problems is they're not held accountable for shit, and they get away with murder, literally.
I kind of wonder how our World War II generation would feel about what's going on. Like just standing there and turning our head, or even arming what's going on with the very thing that they were doing to protect, the victims of genocide, and obviously the victims of just the invasion in 39 to 45. And then the same in Israel. I would imagine that a lot of people, that lost their entire family or whatever it was during, Auschwitz and other areas of the Holocaust, what would they think now? We could bring all those people now and show them this is 2025. What would they think? I bet you they would be fucking appalled. Both the American, the Allied ones, and the people that were, ultimately moved to Israel. I'm talking about Israelis specifically. So this just underlines, the normal people would never have let this happen. And they would be appalled at what's happened, only 80 short years since all those tragedies occurred in our history.
I agree 100%. And I think the whole never again applies to everyone. Never again for anyone, not just, the Jews. It shouldn't happen to anyone. But I think that's the problem, is that they feel like they got a monopoly on that. And to me, honestly, it's because I grew up in Germany. I've been to Poland 4 times. And if anyone goes to these, any of the death camps, concentration camps, they're going to be changed. It's one of those things where I ask myself, like, what would I have done at that time? Would I have the moral courage to speak out about this? And it's because of these places that changed my mind. It's because of these places that I feel I have to speak out, because it's happening again. And just because it's a different type of person, because it's a different religion, or because they're different color, they're brown and they're Muslim. How does that change that it's another genocide? It's ethnic cleansing. It's all the things that happen to them. And it's because I experienced, and because I've seen the things that have happened then, not in person, like I wasn't in World War II, but, if you, go to Auschwitz, if you go to any of the concentration camps and death camps, it's going to change you. You know what I mean? And so either you can, and the thing is that they've been able to manipulate that to the point where use that as like a shield like if you speak out against it, you're anti-Semitic and you're a Holocaust denier and anything else. It's like, no, because of that is why I'm speaking out, because I don't want that to happen to anyone.
Exactly.
It's just wrong to happen to anyone. And anyone that actually like is against that, you're literally saying genocide for thee, but not for me. You know what I mean? And I think that's absolutely just despicably, it's despicable by and vile and just absolutely disgusting.
100%. Well, I think that's a good place to round off. We've been chatting for quite a while, but I mean, this has been so important because you don't hear this very often. I'm sure there's some podcasts and things they talk about this a lot, but on most people's radar, you don't. And this is coming from a kindness, compassion, humanity lens. It's not leaning in one way. It's just, this is wrong, this is right. And again, you hit on the term that I talk about even in the fire service, moral courage. We have fire chiefs that just roll over in their beds while their men and women are being buried because of their poor decisions. Same thing. You either have moral courage and you don't. And I think this is what's so important about conversations like this, that, we have to shed light on what is wrong. And we have to, as you said, hold the people that are, doing the wrongdoing accountable for these things and make sure it doesn't happen again. Because one of the biggest tragedies happened to the Jewish people. And so this isn't about a religion. It's about not letting that same kind of atrocity happen again, God forbid, attached to the very religion, the very types of people that, our combined nations, our forefathers fought to liberate all those years ago. It's up to us. They've all gone. They gave their lives and they've now passed on. It's up to our generation to be their voices and make sure it doesn't happen again. So I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time and so courageous with your voice and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Great conversation, man. I always appreciate it, man. And man, you have some great shows. I really enjoy them. I appreciate you having me on. It's definitely an honor to be part of that. You got some big hitters on there, man. And I hope you keep doing what you're doing, and please keep speaking out. Keep fighting a good fight, brother.